Luna had bought that lake house with 4 years of overtime, skipped vacations, and lunches she ate alone at her desk. Every single corner of that property on Lake Mendota had her fingerprints on it, not just legally, but emotionally. She'd picked out the wood paneling herself, driven 2 hours to a salvage yard outside of Milwaukee to find the right porch railings, and spent an entire October weekend restaining the deck because she wanted it the exact shade of cedar that reminded her of her grandmother's kitchen. That house wasn't an asset on a balance sheet. It was the only place in the world where Luna felt like she could breathe. So when she packed her bags for Tokyo in early March, she didn't think twice about leaving it sitting there, quiet and locked, snow still crusted around the dock. She'd been gone before. The house always waited. She'd been in Tokyo for 3 days, still adjusting to the time difference, still operating on 4 hours of sleep and too much green tea, when her colleague Sandra Holt nudged her during a break between meetings. "You doing okay? You look like you're somewhere else." Luna smiled, straightened her blazer. "Just tired. Let's finish this." That was the version of Luna that most people knew, the one who pushed through, the one who handled things. She'd built that version deliberately, because growing up in the Calloway house had taught her early that nobody was coming to rescue you. You either handled your business or you got buried under someone else's chaos. And chaos in the Calloway family almost always had Corey's name attached to it. Her brother was 41 years old and had started, by last count, 7 businesses: a food truck, a landscaping company, 2 different online retail ventures, some kind of consulting firm that nobody could fully explain, including Corey. None of them lasted more than 18 months. None of them made real money. But every single one of them had a launch phase where Corey needed help. Needed a loan, needed a co-signer, needed someone to believe in him just this once, because this time was genuinely different. Luna had helped twice. The first time she was 30, and she told herself it was an investment in her brother's future. The second time she was 34, and she told herself she was doing it for her parents, who got anxious whenever Corey was struggling. After that, she stopped answering those particular phone calls. Not because she stopped loving him, but because she'd learned that loving someone and funding their dysfunction were 2 entirely different things. She thought that was a lesson her parents had eventually accepted too. She was wrong. The message came through on a Wednesday night Tokyo time, which made it Wednesday morning back in Madison. She was sitting in the hotel restaurant, picking at rice and half reading a contract revision, when her phone buzzed with a text from her mother Carol. "Honey, we need to talk when you get a chance. Nothing urgent, just something we should catch up on." Luna read it twice. Carol only said, "nothing urgent," when something was urgent. That was a long-standing pattern. She typed back that she'd call in the morning, set the phone face down, and spent the rest of dinner not tasting her food. The call happened the next morning, crammed into 15 minutes before her first meeting. Carol talked around it for a while, asked about Tokyo, asked about the weather there, asked whether Luna was eating enough. And then Raymond got on the line too, which meant this was a 2-parent conversation, which meant it was serious. Her father spoke first, in that careful, slow way he had when he was preparing to say something he knew wouldn't land well. "Luna, you know Corey's been going through a rough patch." She closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. What happened? It wasn't a question. She already knew the shape of what was coming. She just didn't know how bad the shape was yet. Carol jumped in. He found this opportunity, a real one this time, and he needed capital to get it moving. The bank wouldn't work with him because of his credit, and he was in a real tight spot, and we didn't have enough to cover what he needed. "What did you do?" Still not a question. Raymond said it plainly. He always did, eventually. "We sold the lake house, Luna. We listed it through a friend of Corey's who does real estate, and it closed about 10 days ago. Corey needed the money to get his business off the ground. We knew you'd understand once you—" She didn't hear the rest of the sentence. There was a sound in her ears like static, like the moment after something loud when the world goes briefly white. She sat there in that Tokyo hotel room, in her blazer, with her meeting 20 minutes away, and she felt something shift in her chest that she knew from experience didn't shift back easily. "You shouldn't have done this," she said. Her voice was quiet. That was the thing that probably scared them more than if she'd yelled. Luna only got quiet like that when she had moved past the feeling stage and into something colder. "Luna, I have to go to a meeting." She hung up. Sandra found her in the hallway outside the conference room, standing very still, staring at the middle distance. "What happened?" My parents sold my house. Sandra stared at her. Your what? While I was here. They sold my lake house to fund my brother's business. Luna said it the same way you'd read a sentence off a page. Flat. Measured. I need 5 minutes. She went to the bathroom, ran cold water over her wrists, looked at herself in the mirror for a while. She had her grandmother's eyes, dark, patient, the kind that didn't show panic. She used that now. She pulled every feeling she had about Lake Mendota and Cedarwood and 4 years of overtime down into a place she could seal off temporarily. There was work to do in that conference room. The feelings would still be there tonight. She called Daniel Webb from her hotel room that night. Daniel was a property attorney she'd worked with twice before, once when she bought the lake house, and once when a contractor had tried to walk off with her deposit on a renovation. He was thorough, unhurried, and he never oversold what he could do. She laid out the facts. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. You're the sole owner on the deed? Yes. No power of attorney, no joint ownership, nothing your parents had signing authority over. Nothing. Then they had no legal right to sell it. He said it simply, the way you'd explain something to someone who already understood it but needed to hear it spoken aloud. The question now is how far this went and who was involved. I'll need the deed, any communications they sent you, and whatever you can find out about the buyer and the transaction timeline. I'll get you everything, Luna said. Luna. He paused. I know this isn't just a property issue. I know, she said. But right now, let's make it a legal one. She flew home on a Sunday. Didn't tell her parents she was back. She drove past Lake Mendota on the way from the airport. Didn't stop. She could see the roof line of her house from the road, her porch railings, the ones she'd driven to that salvage yard for. And there were lights on inside that belonged to someone else now. She kept driving. The next 10 days she spent working with Daniel, going through documents, pulling the transaction apart piece by piece. What they found was worse in some ways than she'd expected and more manageable in others. Corey's friend, the real estate contact who'd brokered the deal, had pushed the paperwork through in a way that had either missed the ownership question entirely or had chosen not to ask it. The buyer was a couple from Illinois who appeared to be genuine and uninvolved. They had no idea the seller wasn't who she said she was. That complicated things on the remedy side. But the core issue was unambiguous. Carol and Raymond Calloway had facilitated the sale of a property they had no legal authority to sell. Daniel filed the paperwork on a Thursday morning. The lawyer knocked on her parents' door on a gray Tuesday in April. Luna wasn't there. She didn't need to be. Daniel had told her how these things usually went. The initial contact, the formal notice, the look on people's faces when something they thought was finished turned out to be just beginning. She imagined her mother opening the door, seeing a man in a good coat holding documents, and she felt something she couldn't quite call satisfaction. It wasn't that. It was closer to the feeling you get when a thing that was wrong gets officially acknowledged as wrong. Carol called her 20 minutes later. Her voice had a texture Luna had never heard in it before. Something thin and frightened underneath the surface. Luna, there's a lawyer here. He's saying, I know what he's saying, Mom. You can't be serious. We're your family. We did this for your brother. You did this to me, Luna said. And I told you, when you called me in Tokyo, that you shouldn't have done it. You didn't ask what I meant by that. I think you assumed I meant it emotionally. She paused. I meant it legally, too. Silence. I don't want to destroy anyone, Luna continued. That's not what this is, but that house was mine. My money, my deed, my name. You didn't ask me. You didn't warn me. You just decided that Corey's need outweighed my ownership. Her voice stayed level. That's not how property law works. And honestly, it's not how family should work either. Raymond got on the line then. His voice was heavier than she'd ever heard it. We thought you'd understand. I might have, she said quietly, if you'd asked. The legal process took several more months to fully resolve. The buyer, who genuinely had no fault in any of it, had to be carefully dealt with. Daniel handled that side with a lot of patience and some difficult conversations. Corey's new business, which the money had supposedly launched, was already showing the familiar signs of early trouble by June. That was almost beside the point by then. What Luna got back wasn't just a property dispute outcome. It was something harder to name. It was the confirmation that she had been right. All those years of keeping her finances separate, of not co-signing, of drawing lines that her family called coldness and she called survival. She hadn't been wrong to protect herself. She'd just never expected to have to protect herself from this particular direction. She went back to the lake house in late summer, after everything had settled, sat on the porch she'd rebuilt herself, watched the water move on Lake Mendota, and let herself feel all the things she'd locked away in that Tokyo hotel bathroom back in March. It wasn't a triumphant feeling. It was quieter than that. Something like standing on solid ground after a long time on uncertain surfaces. She'd built this. It was still hers. And now she knew, in a way she hadn't quite known before, exactly what she was willing to do to keep what she'd earned. Ownership is not just emotional, it's legal, and those two things must be protected equally. The real lesson here is this. Document everything. Keep your property in your name alone when it is yours alone. And understand that family is not a legal standing. No amount of goodwill or good intention transfers property rights. The moment Luna said, "You shouldn't have done this," she wasn't just expressing hurt. She was drawing a boundary that the law would later enforce for her.